All right, so we are moving into week 2 of our anatomy and physiology summer session. And as we go into this next week, we are going to be moving into our respiratory chapter. Before we get into that information, I want to spend a couple of minutes and go through some changes in your respiratory lab. So in the kit that you picked up, there were two labs. The first one with the cardiovascular system went with that information that we covered last week. And then the second lab activity is going to deal with the respiratory system. So one of the things was, I know you guys are getting them in kits and you have all the materials, but we are going to make adjustments to the lab activities because of the fact that we're not doing them face to face. And there's just some things that we need to change and alter because of how we are having to do them. So even though you are getting them in kits, please remember to kind of hold off and wait for the directions so that you're not repeating, having to redo, or potentially using up your resources and not being able to do the lab the way that we need to do it in order to make it work for us. So looking at the lab sheets in your kit, you should have had a set of information or directions that went over the lung capacity lab. And when we talk about lung capacity, what we're actually looking at is the amount of air that you can move in and out of your lungs. And there are lots of different ways that we can do that. And it's something that we really don't think too much about. We breathe in, we breathe out, and our brain kicks in and regulates that for us. And so we don't pay a lot of attention to it. But that amount of air that we're moving in and out can tell us a lot of information about the functioning of our body. And so when we're talking about lung capacity, just keep in mind that it is going to vary from one person to the next. And there's a lot of reasons why it's going to vary from one person to the next. And I'm sure you guys can kind of come up with a couple ideas right off the top of your head as to why one person would have a different amount of lung capacity compared to somebody else. So this is going to give you a chance to measure your own lung capacity and see where you're at. Now, if you look at your lab sheets, it gives you some background information, just a paragraph or two. Go ahead and read through that, and then it's going to ask you to form a hypothesis. And it's going to ask you to consider what you think your lung volume is going to be compared to the theoretical capacity. Now, theoretical capacity is a measurement that they took with a very large sample size. So they tested thousands of people, and based off of the numbers they got from those thousands of people, they came up with a average number. And that's what the theoretical capacity is. Now, when you look at lung capacity charts, there's a lot of information that you have to consider. Gender is going to be one of them, height is going to be one of them, weight is going to be one of them. And so when they do these sample sizes, they are pulling very specific people, and you have a specific gender at a specific height at a specific age range, and they are testing their lung capacity and then coming up with that theoretical number. So when it's asking you that question, what it's asking you to do is determine where you think you're going to be in relationship to that theoretical capacity. Now, the nice thing about a hypothesis, and some people struggle with a hypothesis because they want to be right. Please write the hypothesis before you do any measurements. Before you inflate the balloon, before you measure anything, I want you to come up with what you think you are or how you're going to test against that theoretical number. Now, the great thing about a hypothesis is if you are wrong, it's okay. A hypothesis is an educated guess as to what you think the outcome is going to be, but it gives you something to test. And that's really the core of what a hypothesis is. It's your jumping off point. So even if you test it out and in the end you figure out you were wrong, you don't have to go back and rewrite that hypothesis. That's not what the hypothesis is about. It's just where you thought you were going to be at the beginning, then you actually test it and see where you're at the end. So write that hypothesis before you do anything. If you figure out at the end that you are wrong or somewhere in the middle, that's fine. Leave it alone. Don't go back and change it. Now, for the math portion, it's going to ask you to take 3 measurements. Now, in your kits, I gave you 2 balloons, and the only reason I gave you 2 balloons was a backup. In case something happened to that first balloon, Somebody always gets going on it and ties off their balloon, just force of habit, because that's what you do with balloons after you blow them up. And for this lab, you do not tie off your balloon at any point. So if you accidentally tie it off, or if something happens and you pop your balloon, I gave you a backup. And that's the only reason that there are 2 balloons in the kit. You'll also have a ruler and a string. And the string is because you need to measure, and you're not going to be able to take that plastic ruler and wrap it around the balloon. So instead, what you do is you take the string, you wrap the string around the widest point of your balloon, mark where you mark the length with your fingers, and then you will take that string and put it up against the ruler and get your measurement that way. So that is how the string and the ruler will work together to give you your measurements. If you have somebody else that can help you out in your household, it might go a little bit easier, but you can do this by yourself as well and not have to tie off the balloon. It takes a little bit of maneuvering, but it can be done. So if you don't have anybody to help you out, like I said, you can still get the lab activity finished up. So you'll take your 3 measurements. I pulled this particular lab set because I like how they step you through the math portion. Math is not everybody's strong suit, and so I think this one really does a good job of showing you the equation you're going to use, where to plug in the numbers, and get you through that process. So if you do have any questions as you move through that portion, that's fine. Send me an email and I will help you with that. Now, you are going to complete steps 1 through 12. And then when you get into 13 on down to 20, we're actually going to change that a little bit. And I'm going to explain what you're going to do when I get into the video lecture for that section. And the reason for that is when we get into the expiratory reserve, what you're actually looking at is if you breathe normal, inhale, exhale, just one normal breath in and out, that is called your tidal volume. And if you were to breathe normally, when you get to the bottom of your exhale and you feel like you're going to then start your inhale process, if you hold it at that exhale, so breathing normally, you get to the bottom of your exhale. If you were to hold it there and then push out what is left that you can force out of your lungs, that additional amount of air that you are forcing out is called your expiratory reserve volume. And that's what the second part of the lab is looking to test. What we have found in the past is that this is very hit and miss, because when some people exhale, they don't have enough force in their lungs to go ahead and push out enough that they can inflate the balloon and get a measurable amount. Now, if we were face to face, no problem. If you were a person that could not do that additional exhale and still have enough force to inflate your balloon, I would have you pull numbers from somebody else sitting next to you. We don't have that ability here. So just to kind of make it easy, I'm going to, like I said, change up that last part. So you were only doing 1 through 12. Wait for your directions in your video lecture on what you need to do for the second part of that, since we are not completing the lab as is. And then once you have that finished, same process as last week, you'll take a picture of it and then send that to me through email. If you have any questions, please let me know and I will help you with that. But that kind of hopefully takes you through the process for the second lab activity. The video lecture that I'm going to post, like I said, you'll want to pay close attention to that, because your directions for what you're going to do for the second part will be in that video.